Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm Maddie and today I'm going to be going through my third trimester symptoms. I'm not pregnant anymore. I actually have a 7-week-old as of today and I want to film this video before I forget too much of my pregnancy. So in my phone notes I wrote down all the symptoms I was having week by week, so if you see me referring to my phone, that is why. Also, I can't remember which week I got up to in my second trimester video. In different parts of the world, the first and second trimester and all the trimesters sort of start at different times. If you're looking for a specific week, you can refer back to my other videos. Okay, week 29. So I had another doctor's appointment this week. In the previous blood test that I had, I also had low blood sugars, which explained why I was so exhausted after that gestational diabetes test, and that it really took it out of me for like 2 days. I was recovering from that test. So yeah, I didn't really have to do anything different. She said maybe eat a jelly bean if I feel a bit low in energy. I was getting exhausted really easily a lot this week. During this week too, we had a really hot day, and on that day I got swollen legs again. I guess it's probably pretty common in pregnancy that the hotter weather makes you swell up more. I got so swollen in Cairns when it was really hot up there. And then I guess in Melbourne it's a lot cooler and less humid, and then the one hot day we get, I swell up again. So shout out to all those mums that are pregnant during the really hot months, because it must be so hard for you guys. We were actually coming into winter during this time. We had a really random cold night. On that day I was sleeping in cool pajamas with my blankets off, because during this pregnancy I felt so hot and sweaty during the night. I woke up to him going crazy in my stomach. He was kicking like mad, and I was thinking what is going on? Is he okay? And then I just had this mothering instinct come into my brain. I'm like, he must be cold. It's cold right now. He would have to be cold. And then I pulled the blankets up over me and he pretty much stopped kicking straight away. I later googled it and I was like, can unborn babies feel temperature at this age? And apparently yes they can. I thought that was really cool that I had this little connection with him of trying to work out what does he need. And yeah, it was quite special. I felt bad for freezing the poor little boy, but we got through it. Okay, week 30. So during this week I really felt like I was having some sort of IBS. My husband Ryan actually has IBS and I never really could fully understand how it felt for him, but I was starting to feel like I was understanding, because just certain foods would sort of set off my stomach. Maybe there was just so little space in my stomach, who knows, but I didn't feel very well in my tummy when I was eating during this week and pretty much around this time of pregnancy. I also found my energy levels continuing to decrease. During this pregnancy I've been trying to keep fit and do at least one yoga and one sort of cardio body weight training video a week. And I was finding it so hard to do any exercise, push myself to get through it, and also going for walks with the dogs, I was walking slower and slower. And I was also finding it hard during the yoga to get into all of my different yoga positions because the belly was getting so much bigger. So I also wrote that I officially put on 10 kilos since starting my pregnancy, which I think I was happy with at that point, but I was also slightly worried, I know, more towards the end, because I was like, oh no, now I'm continuing to gain more and more weight and I don't want to put on too much where it's unhealthy. And yeah, so that was a slight concern, but also I was like, well, I'm pregnant, my body's different to everyone else's. I don't want to be too hung up on weight. At the start I was more hung up on it because I was worried I wasn't gaining enough due to being so nauseous, but I started to worry about the opposite, which was really weird. I also noticed this week that my belly button looked slightly bruised, around the top of it and the bottom. And now that I'm post-birth, postpartum, and my stomach is somewhat coming back together, I've noticed that I have a really slight line. And that was basically where the bruising was. And it was quite painful to touch, so I do still feel like it was slight bruising, but at the same time I'm like, okay, maybe it was that line sort of forming, or maybe the line was just there at the same time, but I couldn't see it because it was so stretched and it's such a pale line, you can barely see it. During this week it really felt like he was going sideways a lot more. Either that or his little legs or something were just going crazy, and his arms. I always loved trying to rub the little spots that he would kick. and see if he would like kick back and things like that. Okay, this is week 31. So week 31, my belly button was still looking really bruised and very sore to touch. I also experienced like a lightning pain in my crotch. I didn't really experience that very often for the rest of pregnancy. Very intense though when it happened. I also started to feel him having more and more hiccups this week, and with him having the hiccups I could really tell that he was head down because they would always happen really low. And that was like a good sign for me, very relieving to know that he's still head down. Okay, now we're on to week 32. So in week 32, I had a hair appointment in the city, and I noticed when I was walking around the city, I started cramping a lot. I'm not sure why all the walking caused cramping, but that was quite concerning to me. And I also found that I was walking so slow in the city that like the slowest like old ladies that you generally see and overtake were like overtaking me. So that was kind of embarrassing. I also started having really weird and vivid dreams. So in my notes I wrote about one dream I had, and I'll read you a little bit of it. I had a dream about giving birth and thinking every contraction was really exciting, and I dreamt about the baby, but it was a toy baby made of cucumbers. And then when people came around to congratulate us, I swapped its head to a toy head because that was more appropriate for them when they came over. That's really weird, like thinking back to this dream now, like I can't even remember it. But I guess that gives you an insight into the weird pregnancy dreams that you can get. Also noticed this week that I started to smell worse, and I remember at the start of this pregnancy I felt like I smelled better, and like not at all. My pregnancy brain was still in full swing and I was getting more and more of it and starting to spell words wrong. I remember like typing messages to my friends. I would just spell so many wrong words and I'd have to go back and correct them and be like, how did I even, why did my brain do that? So I was also finding it more and more hard to bend over during this week. It just felt like my legs were carrying so much extra weight and they just felt so tired and heavy under like my belly. It was really interesting to have like, you know, this sudden increase in weight and this huge belly and, you know, a kicking baby, and your body is just so tired from it and can really feel fatigued from the extra weight that you're just suddenly carrying around. I was also still feeling lots of hiccups from him, which I liked to feel and know that he was head down still. And I had what should have been my final ultrasound this week. During the ultrasound they said he was around the 55th percentile. Take that with a grain of salt because they even say like it's not super accurate. But yeah, he was around the 55th percentile and he was still head down, and my cervix and everything looked good. He looked good. So that was a good sign. 33 weeks. So I started getting a lot more back pain, and I also had a doctor's appointment to go over some more blood tests just to make sure my iron levels were on the rise. But this time they found out that not only did I have low hemoglobin, I also had low platelets. At this point I had like upped my iron tablets. I think I was taking them every second day, but after this blood test and those results I started taking them every day. It was really weird because I was taking iron tablets and I was increasing them, yet it just wasn't enough. Like my body was taking so much and giving it to my baby. We also had our baby shower this week, which was really fun. But after it, because I was on my feet all day, my ankles swelled up again. And I was waking up a lot during the nights now. I started to get like that weird pregnancy insomnia where you just sort of wake up randomly during the nights. It wasn't consistent, but it was just every so often, like I just couldn't sleep. I also started to bruise a lot more easily, and I think that was because of my low platelets. I got this awful bruise on my hips, and I still actually have like a very faint like discoloration on my hips from that bruise. Also after the baby shower I got a slight cold. It wasn't too bad, but I had just like a slight sore throat and everything, and that didn't help with my energy levels, and I felt even more tired, if that was even possible. I also noticed that my belly button continued to disappear, like it was getting flatter and flatter. I had quite an innie and now it was just like this like slight line. And yeah, like Ryan would make fun of me for it. And I also had a sudden craving for really crunchy things like gherkins. So this whole pregnancy I was wondering, when am I going to start to crave pickles? It was just about finding like the right pickle, the right vinegar. And I bought this like jar of like gherkins. and they were just so delicious. Week 34. So during this week I noticed that I was a lot more clumsy. I also still had the cold from the baby shower, and it was starting to make me cough, and I noticed that when I was coughing at night it upset him and he started like kicking around like crazy whenever I was coughing at night, so he didn't like me coughing. It was waking him up. I also got a few more leg cramps this week, and they weren't super bad. I was able to like sort of stretch out my foot whenever they happened, and they would ease off and not go into that full cramp mode, you know, when like your foot's just all curled up like this and it's so painful. It was just like that twinging of it's gonna happen, and then I would just like keep my foot as straight as I could and as flat and bent back as I could, and that seemed to help. And then this is the week where I started to worry about putting on more weight. Looking back now, I feel like pregnant women should be able to gain whatever they want. Like, they're pregnant, you know, like grow the baby, keep you happy, like you gotta eat extra anyway. Obviously there's always within reasons and you should be eating healthy foods, but I was eating healthy foods. You never know what your body's gonna do. So I kept trying to tell myself that, like I shouldn't worry, but I just kept worrying anyway, and I kept looking up all these articles and what's my healthy weight range and all that stuff. But yeah. And this week we also started a childbirth class with the hospital, me and Ryan, and it was really good. We had like a midwife go through everything. Week 35. So in week 35, I really had to pull back and stop doing like any of my YouTube video editing or filming new videos or anything like that, because I started to get really worried that the baby could be coming soon and that I hadn't bought enough stuff or researched enough stuff and got enough stuff ready. Like, I wanted to clean out everything I owned, like go through every single item that I ever owned and like categorize it and throw away what I didn't want and all this stuff. So I was like, I have no time, I have to do all this stuff now. I also started a online hypnobirthing class, which I wanted to do to help me sort of be calm and relaxed during labor, and also give me like the right breathing techniques and just help me as much as possible to get through it pretty much. So I was getting a lot more kicks again this week, and they were all in the ribs and they were very strong, and he was getting quite strong at this point. I remember like him kicking me really hard in the ribs like a few times, and every time I would turn to Ryan and be like, I don't know like how much more my ribs can take of this. Like, if he gets much stronger, he could easily like push one out of place or crack it or... And I remember there was also another time in the car when I was driving and he kicked me really hard really suddenly in the rib, and I like physically went ow out loud. And then whenever I started to feel him start to kick my ribs too, I would like just sort of squish my hand, like prise his little foot off my rib, sort of remove the foot from the rib. It was quite funny. So this week we also wanted to make it our last week of seeing people, because we didn't know how much longer until I would give birth, and you know, with risk of COVID and everything, we didn't want me to get sick, and we also just had so much to do. But in saying that, that didn't really happen because I kept going out and seeing my friends and doing pottery, and it was kind of like a once a week thing that I would like go out and see people anyway, so but we didn't organize any extra catch-ups. It was pretty much just like pottery was still a thing. Gotta keep me sane too, you know, have my creative outlet. I also noticed that my nipples felt really sore this week when it was cold, and it felt like there were like little rocks under them or something. Now looking back and remembering that I had this is really interesting, because now that I'm like postpartum and breastfeeding, I still get that. Like, whenever I get cold, my nipples get really sore and sensitive, and my nurses and everyone think that I might have like a mild case of nipple vasospasms. I'll put it down below, I'm probably saying the word wrong, but essentially if you have poor circulation in your hands and feet, which I do, it can mean that you might get this condition, and it essentially means there's not as much blood flow to your nipples, and it can cause them to be extra sensitive and painful. So it's quite interesting that that was happening to me before I gave birth, because like that's kind of been a big deal in my breastfeeding journey so far. It's all starting to resolve now. Like, I don't have as much like sensitivity and pain like I did, but I still have to like keep myself warm. During this week too, I started to get a few more cramps again. One of them was quite period-like, and it made me really worry that, oh, maybe I was going into labor. I wasn't, but yeah, it sort of concerned me because at this point in my pregnancy, like, I kind of don't want to have any more random cramping because it could mean that things are starting to happen, like, you just don't know. So also during this week, I was like, oh my god, we need to do a pregnancy photo shoot for me, otherwise I'll never have these memories. And Ryan and I ran down to the park, took some photos, then we ran to the beach and took some photos, and it was so hard to do because I was so exhausted at this point, so tired. But I'm really glad that we did it because now I have these memories. And I mean, I went into labor not long after that. 36 weeks. So during this week, again, I woke up with period-like cramps and they kind of didn't go away until I got up and moved around. I also noticed that my hands were very swollen when waking up this week. Like, they just felt really tight and swollen. I remember talking to my doctor about it, and she said that at this point in my pregnancy, like, I just have so much more extra fluid and that can happen. Like, the fluid sort of presses against the nerves and it makes your hands feel like numb and like quite weak in the mornings. And it wasn't until I started moving around again that they sort of felt normal. At this point in my pregnancy too, I started to feel really uncomfortable with the amount of swelling and heaviness in my body, and I was finding it really hard to like get up and down, like sit up, sit down, lay down, get up. It was just such a struggle to do any of that. And then I had a hospital appointment, and during the hospital appointment, the doctor became quite worried that she thought he was quite small. And she sent me to get an extra ultrasound to see if he was small or not. And the reason why they worry if he could be too small or not would be like, is he getting enough food? Is the placenta still working? All of those kinds of things. That was a little bit concerning. I remember when she told me, oh, he might be a bit small, I was kind of like, no, he's not. Like, he's fine. Like, I just had this instinct and maybe stubbornness or not wanting to like accept anything could be wrong. But I still went ahead and like got the ultrasound and just made sure he was okay. But I remember it was also a little bit of a shock because they wanted me to come back again in a week, and I remember talking to the receptionist and being like, oh, can I push it further than a week just in case I couldn't get the ultrasound in time? Maybe I needed a few more days to get it done because I had heard that it was really hard to get an appointment with the ultrasound people. The receptionist was like, oh, let me check. And then like I had like 2 nurses and doctors come out to me and explain like, no, this is really serious. You need to like get on top of this like as soon as you can. And if you can't get it within a week, you need to go and pay for it privately and all this stuff. Like, you can't leave it too long. And that did freak me out a bit. And during this week, I also had more pressure in my pelvis. And whenever I got up and down, I started to notice like more stabby feelings in my crotch area. Also during this week, I started to buy the last few things we needed for baby, and it started to feel like everything was coming together. 37 weeks. So at the start of this week, I got that ultrasound that the doctors wanted me to do, and it said that he was fine and he was in the 44th percentile now rather than the 55th. Doctor or someone explained it to me later that they consider there to be a 15% margin either way of error. So for him to be now 44% was still normal and nothing to be concerned about because it wasn't like a 20% difference that way or a 30% difference. So that was good. And they also said during that appointment that his head was right up against my cervix, which was also a very good sign. I also wrote down something really weird and like interesting in my notes that I didn't remember until now reading it again. But I wrote that this week I also heard like a little pop randomly in my stomach, and to me it sounded like he might have popped or cracked one of his little bones while moving. You know how you move your arm and it clicks, or you can crack your fingers or whatever. Like, it was kind of like that. I'm still not sure if that was what it was or not, but that's just like what I felt it was at the time. Then this week we started to do a lot trying to get things ready still, and we wanted to clean up all the dogs, so we wanted to bath them, do their nails, all that stuff. And I started clearing out all the shelves and filling up the shelves with like baby clothes in our room so that we would have like a little wardrobe section for him. And yeah, after that day I started to get a lot more Braxton Hicks later that night, and then from then on I continued to have Braxton Hicks, which made me quite worried because I'm like, oh no, have I overdone it? Am I now going into labor? Then overnight the Braxton Hicks started to ease up a bit and they felt a lot better that morning, but they were still pretty much there. Also this week my hips started to feel a lot more loose and they sort of like popped and cracked when I would sit up. And then the last thing I wrote in my notes before everything kicked off, pretty much, I finally got my blood test results and they were normal and my blood levels were finally rising and everything was in the normal range. So I don't know when I'm posting this video in the timeline of all my pregnancy videos that I want to post, but Ryan and I have filmed a birth story video, and if it's up now I will link it down below, otherwise it'll be coming soon. And yeah, like it was actually quite shocking that I went into labour at 37 weeks. I had always suspected I would go a bit earlier, but at the same time, like they say your first baby is supposed to go beyond 40 weeks, so I was kind of like, oh, is it gonna happen, is it not? And then when it happened at 37 weeks, I was like, oh my god, this is happening so soon. Like I really wanted those extra few weeks just to get some more stuff done, pretty much. Like I was still in my nesting phase. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!